It begins quietly, almost imperceptibly, like the first faint tremor beneath the surface before an earthquake. A look, a gesture, an unanswered text, a pulse of longing that arrives without warning. Most people never notice the shift when it begins. Most people don't see the invisible machinery of desire turning its ears underneath every relationship, romantic, familial, even the friendships we swear are untouched by such forces. But Schopenhauer saw it. He saw it with the unsettling clarity of a man who was both deeply lonely and frighteningly perceptive. Someone who spent more time studying the inner weather of human longing than enjoying the comforts of companionship. And what he revealed in that cold, dissecting gaze of his was something we still struggle to admit today. That desire is rarely pure, rarely innocent, and almost never equal. Schopenhauer believed that desire is the trickster behind our greatest joys and our deepest agonies, that it seduces us with an illusion of choice while manipulating us like marionettes in a story we didn't write. We think we choose our partners, our lovers, the people we feel drawn to, but in his view, it is not the conscious mind that falls in love. It is something older, something instinctive, almost primal, choosing in silence while the conscious self constructs pretty explanations afterward. And once that desire has awakened, once it points like an arrow toward someone, it becomes almost impossible to dislodge. You can feel it in the body before it ever becomes a thought in the mind. The electricity in the chest, the restless energy, the sudden fear of losing something you don't even have yet. The kind of desire that makes you edit your messages 3 times before pressing send, or rehearse conversations you will never actually have. If you look back at your own life, you can probably trace the outlines of this invisible hand. Moments when you pursued someone who wasn't good for you without understanding why. Moments when you let yourself be pulled into a story you knew would hurt you. Moments when you felt powerless in the face of your own longing, as if something larger had seized control of the narrative. Schopenhauer would say that every one of those moments was part of the same unfolding drama, the timeless choreography of desire, shaping the balance of power between 2 people. Because the truth he uncovered, and the truth most of us try to look away from, is that desire always creates an imbalance. The person who desires more, who reaches further, who fears loss more deeply, always holds less power. And that imbalance doesn't have to look dramatic. It can be subtle, almost invisible, woven into the everyday gestures of affection and withdrawal. One person waits, the other decides. One person hopes, the other chooses. One person reaches, the other steps back. And the more desperate the reaching becomes, the more the other person instinctively steps away, as if compelled by some silent gravitational rule. Schopenhauer didn't describe this dynamic to shame anyone. He described it because he saw the torment it created. He saw how human beings could become trapped inside desires that deceived them with promises of happiness, only to deliver anxiety, self-doubt, and emotional dependence. And he knew that most people never realize how much of their suffering comes from confusing desire with love, possession with connection, control with security. Think of the times you believed that if you could just win someone over, if you could make them want you as much as you wanted them, everything would finally feel whole. Think of the people you convinced yourself you needed, even when they gave you crumbs of affection or left you suspended in uncertainty. Schopenhauer would say you were caught in what he called the will, that blind, insatiable force inside every living thing that wants, and wants, and wants, without ever being satisfied. A force that makes you chase someone not because they're right for you, but because your desire refuses to let go. And perhaps the most haunting part of his insight is that the will doesn't care about your happiness. It cares only about its continuation. It binds you to people who stir your longing, not to those who nourish your soul. It keeps you trapped in cycles of pursuit and disappointment because the energy of desire itself becomes the reward. You begin to mistake the hunger for the meal, the chase for the connection, the fear of loss for the presence of love. Yet within this stark view of human longing, there is a quiet doorway to freedom, a recognition that once we understand the nature of desire, we can stop being ruled by it. We can step back from the story long enough to see the strings that pull us, the illusions that bind us, the power dynamics that shape the relationships we enter. And in that moment of awareness, something remarkable begins to happen. The power of desire softens, loosens, and eventually shifts, because the moment you see the machinery, you are no longer trapped inside it. And yet, even when you begin to see it, even when the gears of desire finally reveal themselves, there's a strange reluctance to step away, because there is something intoxicating about wanting, something that makes the heart feel awake, as though longing itself is proof that we are alive. Schopenhauer understood this too. He saw that desire, despite its cruelty, has a peculiar beauty, the kind that draws us toward people who reflect not who we are, but who we fear we might never become. It's why we chase the mysterious, the unpredictable, the emotionally distant. It's why the people who unsettle us often capture our imagination more than the ones who provide steady kindness. The will doesn't crave comfort. It craves intensity. And intensity, in its rawest form, can feel like gravity. Think of the person who once took up residence in your mind, not because they were generous, not because they understood you, but because something in them felt just out of reach. Maybe it was the way they seemed to live, half inside some hidden world, revealing only fragments of themselves. Maybe it was the warmth they offered one day and withdrew the next. Maybe it was the way they never fully committed, never fully turned away, always hovering in the ambiguous middle, giving just enough to keep you from leaving. Schopenhauer would say they awakened the will in you, stirred that ancient force that confuses uncertainty with meaning, scarcity with value. The fewer their gestures, the more precious they seemed. The more unpredictable their affection, the more you told yourself it must be real. It is in this imbalance that power begins to take shape. The one who withholds becomes the axis around which the other begins to turn. The mind, desperate for stability, tries to decode every signal, every delayed response, every shift in tone, every change in energy. You begin to study them like a map that leads to the possibility of love, a map that might grant you safety if only you can decipher the terrain. But of course, safety never comes, because the desire that fuels this pursuit is not designed to be satisfied. It is designed to perpetuate itself. And in that unending search, you start to shrink. You start to bend. You start to bargain with your own worth, lowering the price in the hope that they might one day decide you are enough. This is where the quiet tragedy of Schopenhauer's insight begins to unfold, not in grand heartbreak, but in the subtle erosion of the self. You start swallowing your needs, softening your voice, pretending you don't care as deeply as you do. You start accepting behavior that wounds you because the thought of losing them feels like a deeper wound still. You start rationalizing their inconsistencies, convincing yourself that their detachment is a sign of depth rather than disinterest. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the center of your world shifts from your own inner life to the unpredictable currents of theirs. Schopenhauer believed this: vulnerability is not a flaw, but a universal human condition. Anyone, no matter how strong or self-assured, can be seized by the will and pulled into a dynamic that makes them feel strangely powerless. And this powerlessness doesn't come from weakness. It comes from the peculiar way desire chooses its targets. It does not choose based on logic. It chooses based on magnetism, on instinct, on the mysterious resonance between your history and theirs. Something about them awakens an ancient script you didn't know you were still carrying. Something about them makes you believe, even fleetingly, that your story could be rewritten if they chose you completely. But here is the cruel twist Schopenhauer saw with devastating clarity. The person who holds power in this dynamic rarely feels the same depth of desire. And this is not because they are cold or cruel. It is because desire is rarely symmetrical. It curves, it tilts, it folds unevenly across two hearts. One person looks at the other and sees a possibility that feels luminous and life-changing. The other looks back and sees affection, maybe intrigue, maybe attraction, but not the same burning urgency. And in that discrepancy, the axis of power is born. Yet Schopenhauer did not leave us in despair. His philosophy is often described as dark, but beneath the bleakness is a current of quiet liberation. He believed that the moment we become conscious of our desires, truly conscious, not just intellectually aware, we begin to loosen their grip. The more clearly we see the imbalance, the more the spell weakens. Because there is something profoundly empowering about recognizing that the person you placed on a pedestal is just a person. Their approval is not oxygen. Their inconsistency is not fate. Their presence is not a guarantee of happiness, and their absence is not a guarantee of heartbreak. And when you arrive at that realization slowly, painfully, honestly, the power dynamic begins to shift. Not because they suddenly change, but because you do. You stop negotiating with your worth. You stop idolizing their mystery. You stop mistaking inconsistency for passion. You begin to recognize that the version of them you fell for was partly real and partly projected, an image shaped by your longing and your imagination. And once you see that, something inside you starts to return home to itself. It is then, in that quiet return, that desire begins to relinquish its hold, and you begin to reclaim a kind of power Schopenhauer believed few people ever truly find, the power of seeing clearly. And when that clarity arrives, it does not feel like triumph in the conventional sense. It does not announce itself with fireworks or loud declarations. Instead, it feels like a soft exhale, a settling of the dust in a room that has been spinning too fast for too long. You realize that the tension, the ache, the endless recalculations of what they might mean and what you might do no longer dictate your rhythm. The desire that once seemed like a storm raging inside you has transformed into a quieter current, a current you can observe without being swept away. And in that quiet observation, you discover a strange and profound freedom. The freedom to love without losing yourself, to care without surrendering your sense of worth, to engage without needing to control. Schopenhauer teaches us that this freedom is not about extinguishing desire entirely. Desire is, after all, part of the machinery that keeps life vivid, that makes hearts beat faster, that colors every connection with shades of intensity. But the wisdom lies in understanding it, in acknowledging the ways it can ensnare, the ways it can tilt the scales of power in subtle and sometimes painful ways. When we understand that desire is both the spark and the trap, we no longer mistake the pull for proof of value. We no longer confuse the turbulence of longing with the stability of love. We no longer let another person's indifference become a mirror for our self-worth. And in that awareness, we gain what Schopenhauer might call the triumph, not of conquering others, but of mastering ourselves. Imagine for a moment the people in your life, the ones who stirred longing in ways that felt uncontrollable. Recall the nights spent turning over words in your mind, the moments of anxiety between one message and the next, the subtle rituals of self-persuasion that made you bend toward them again and again. Now imagine looking at all of it with gentle clarity, not with judgment, not with shame, but with understanding. You can see how desire shaped the dance of power, how imbalance created tension, how your own heart was sometimes both prisoner and accomplice. And in that understanding, you begin to release what was never truly yours to hold anyway, the illusion that control over another person could ever bring lasting peace. You begin to release the fantasy that your happiness depends on someone else's choices. And in releasing it, you step into a space that is, paradoxically, infinitely richer, infinitely more alive, because the truth, timeless and uncompromising, is this: the power of desire exists not to punish, not to manipulate, but to teach. It teaches us about our own vulnerabilities, about the ways our hearts can be swayed by the unseen currents of instinct, about the fine line between love and longing, between intimacy and dependence. It teaches us that emotional power is rarely equal, that the dance of relationships is as much about self-awareness as it is about connection, and that the most profound mastery comes not from bending others to our will, but from understanding the will within ourselves. In that mastery lies compassion for others, for the ones who unknowingly hold sway over our hearts, and for ourselves, for the ways we have loved and erred and grown along the way. So, as you sit with this reflection, let it sink in with the weight and the grace of a revelation that does not demand applause, but whispers its quiet insistence. To desire consciously is to live consciously, to love consciously, to navigate relationships with a clarity that is both humbling and liberating. Schopenhauer did not offer a path to easy happiness, nor did he promise smooth sailing through the turbulent seas of human connection. What he offered, in his relentless and piercing observations, was a lens through which we might finally see the machinery of our longing, the currents of power that flow beneath our affections, and the potential for a deeper, steadier freedom that exists once we step outside the storm. And here is the lesson we carry forward. The desires that once felt like chains can become instruments of insight. The power imbalances that once left us anxious and uncertain can become mirrors reflecting our own capacity for awareness and strength. When we understand the hidden rules of desire, when we see clearly how it moves through us and through others, we stop being at the mercy of its whims. We reclaim ourselves. We step into relationships not as victims of our impulses, but as conscious participants in the dance of connection, fully alive, fully human, and profoundly freed. So, take this with you as you navigate your own heart and the hearts around you. Notice the pull, the tension, the subtle power plays, but do not be afraid. Observe them, learn from them, and let them teach you about yourself. Because the moment you see desire for what it truly is, not an enemy, not a master, but a force to understand you, unlock a timeless truth, that the most enduring power in any relationship, and in life itself, is not in control over another, but in mastery over yourself. And that is a freedom worth everything.